Hello, you're watching Sightline on MNB World, an interview program that invites various guests for a conversation on different topics. And today in our studio we have Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program in Mongolia, Mrs. Matilda Dimovska. Hello.
Many thanks for having me here.
Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Very pleased indeed, and it's my first time to do it in the national TV. Yes.
Matilda Dimovska assumed the role of UNDP Resident Representative in Mongolia as of 4th of September 2023. In her role, Mrs. Dimovska acts on behalf of the UNDP administrator and as the head of the country office has the overall responsibility for the operational activities of UNDP in Mongolia. Prior to this, she served as UNDP Resident Representative in the Republic of Uzbekistan from 2019 to 2023. During 2016 and 2019, she led the country office support team at UNDP Istanbul Regional Hub for Europe and the Commonwealth of Independent States countries. She also served as a Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP in Turkey, Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP in Moldova, and Assistant Resident Representative of UNDP in Georgia. I have learned that the first major event that was organized by the UNDP since you assumed your office here in Ulaanbaatar was the job mediation event for people with disabilities. Can you share with our viewers about this event and also from the outcomes, if there are?
Well, thank you for asking it, because it was one of the highlights, I think, so far of the work of UNDP that I have seen in Mongolia. And it is this event is very much about the core principle, core commitment and promise of the Sustainable Development Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, the promise of leaving no one behind, meaning the commitment of the member states to eradicate the poverty, to eliminate the discrimination and all forms of deprivation that prevent people from contributing and enjoying the development. So this principle of leave no one behind is basically about ensuring that all people take part and benefit from the development. For its implementation, it's a rather comprehensive matter, and a number of steps are needed. And this particular event that you mentioned is one of those. It was a joint undertaking by the government, supported by UNDP, which was financially also supported by the European Union, to provide one of the basic rights for people living with disabilities, right to employment, and precondition for many other rights and, if you wish so, dignified life. That was that event to help the Ministry of Labor, help the government apply a new approach when supporting the people with this particular, in this particular situation, to look for a job. Unfortunately, in Mongolia, as in many other countries in the world, the people with disabilities are not employed enough, for a number of reasons: institutional, accessibility, even prejudice. So 70% of them are unemployed. So trying to come with a more targeted, tailored to their needs approach while providing and linking them to a potential employment was very important. This intervention of UNDP supported piloting that approach. We are very pleased that 50 people got employment, sustainable, good conditions employment, which was the most important thing. But also we think it was important that we set the model, and we hope that the ministry will take it further, so that many more on a regular basis get that type of access to employment.
We learned from your biography that you were a resident representative also in Uzbekistan, similar to our country. And what were the noticeable achievements and lessons learned during your tenure there?
Yes, indeed, I have been very privileged, in fact, to work in many countries, and the most recent one was the Republic of Uzbekistan, a country that I got to love very much, and where I have been exposed to many development experiences and observed the country. It is a country that has a very many similarities with Mongolia, in fact, and of course differences. But the history of post-communist history and the transition from to a market-based economy and transition to a pluralistic democracy, it's definitely common, and it made the countries both face a number of challenges, economic, social, political challenges. So this is, of course, a very big similarity. So having spent 4 and more years there, and observing the development there, what I found very important to take is, you know, the development is complex, and the importance of interrelated, taking the complexity of the development together, integrated way, but with the center of the human development, because at the end the development is about human development. So having that always in mind is extremely important, because otherwise it does not work. For example, we cannot expect economic growth to the country to grow economically if not all of its people are involved and skilled for that involvement, and particularly nowadays skilled for the future. So that is one big lesson. The other is the spirit of change. What triggers the spirit, the change, and how the change happens? It's extremely important, and I have been observing there. But also on a sector basis, issues like how you drive change into a specific sector. And Uzbekistan was particularly successful recently in terms of the transition to the green energy mix, to transition to use more of the renewable energies. So what they did was this combination of a clear guidance, clear vision and policy, but combined with a swift, very proactive approach, mobilizing foreign direct investments, because of course it requires a lot of investments in the industry, but doing it in a kind of a transparent manner that will assure international investors for the stability of the investment, doing it through the auction principle. So these are a number of very important lessons, I think, in general for the development that I take from that experience. But I point that the most important is that any lesson and any solution, any approach is very deeply rooted, has to be into the reality, into the specific needs, tailored to the needs of Mongolia. And that's my ambition.
And continuing from your experience, what kind of key focus is for Mongolia? What challenges and opportunities do you see in Mongolia?
The focus of UNDP in general is defined with one key document that we have. We call it country program document. It's a compact that we do with the country on the areas of focus and scope of UNDP. It is derived within the broader work compact of the UN, because of course UNDP is a prominent member of the UN in any country. So we have this as a 5-year plan. We revisit it and so on. And for Mongolia, this is the first year that we of implementing of our country program document. That will be for the next 4 years as well, where we have committed to focus on the 3 priorities. One is inclusive, green and diversified economy. Second is the topic of climate adaptation and responsible use, sustainable of natural resources. And the third, the topic of governance. Governance, responsible institutions, and gender equality. So these are the three broad topics on which we devise our cooperation and focus much more in details. But in general, what drives the work of UNDP is to support the SDGs, the country in attaining the SDGs. This is the complex of our work, and we do have that integrator role of integrating of different elements of the development within the UN system. That's the role that, because of the broadest mandate that UNDP has. Now, I think we are at a very particular moment. In September, Mongolia was one of the countries that in New York during the General Assembly presented yet another time its commitment to the sustainable development, whereby a number of areas and its ambition of how to reach the 16 goals were presented. In preparation for that, UNDP has been helping the government to narrow it down, which are the areas that, if advanced, would help other goals to be reached. And in the case of Mongolia, it turned out that to be the renewable energy, access to energy, and particularly the renewables, the topic of the governance, the topic of decentralizing the development, meaning bridging the gap between the urban and the rural, and gender. So the topic that was the most, with the most potential to trigger change in others is the energy one.
Yes, exactly, because Mongolia is quite dependent from its neighboring countries when it comes to electricity and energy. So,
and yet it has such a huge potential when it comes to the renewables, right? So I hope this will be the topics on which we will be focusing much more in the future as well.
I see. When we talk about the operation of the United Nations, we cannot leave the democracy. And when it comes to UNDP, are there any major tasks or programs to be implemented in the future in terms of promoting democracy, human rights, and the freedom of speech?
And this is the topic of good governance, in fact. And the good governance, as we say, is the basis and precondition for the for the development. Precondition for other goals to be achieved is achieving the SDG 16, which is around the good governance and effective institutions. And therefore, it's one of the core pillars of UNDP work globally, and of course in Mongolia. I was very pleased to learn that in Mongolia we have been engaged so much in the past, and in fact on the essential pillars, engaged in the essential pillars of the democracy. We are very proud of the fact that the National Human Rights Center has been established with UNDP support back in the past. I was meeting the center, the commissioners, and was very much impressed in how advanced it is, even the legislation and the operation, but also the independent agency on anti-corruption has been partly result of the work of UNDP. So now we are working with, for example, with the agency on anti-corruption for supporting its reporting mechanism with the support of the government of Korea. That is an important part of the work. When it comes to the human rights, we are at the moment building on the past engagement. We are at the moment working on very important topic of ensuring that the human rights are observed and considered and integrated, to be more precise, into the operation of the private sector, and particularly in the sectors that matter a lot for Mongolia, like the mining sector.
Yes.
Then the other is very soon we will be starting one engagement about mainstreaming human rights into the law enforcement sector bodies. Again, that is supported by the government of USA and so on. So this type of work will continue, and in fact I hear a lot of demand for even much more, and UNDP will of course try to expand in the areas that will that makes a good contribution. I did not mention one, which is the effectiveness of the public administration, which is a civil service.
Yes.
This is, has been a huge topic of engagement of UNDP with the support from the government of Canada. We have been trying to help the government ensure that the principles of merit-based professional civil service is in place, which I was impressed recently to witness in the immigration agency, I think. So, and these are the topics on which we will continue working and focusing in the future.
Recently, we heard that United Nations Development Program has launched its Asia Pacific report on human development of 2024. And can you share with us from the key points of the report, and maybe there are interesting aspects related to Mongolia?
Well, many thanks for that question, because it is a lot of attention we are paying now, and we are discussing how to make that report available and useful for Mongolia best. Human development is around the people, right? It's how they thrive their life, how they can have better opportunities and chances to evolve and enjoy the dignified life. This report was looking into the past achievements, progress of human development, but also how to advance the human development and take the momentum in the Asia-Pacific region. Asia-Pacific is well known in its good progress in terms of the human development, but also it is acknowledged that with a lot of disparities, increasing disparities, and recently, as is the case in most of the world, with turbulences, trends of disruptions as the world is facing. Looking forward, the bigger picture is that the world is, of course, in a state that we are facing very big challenges. Interlinked threats that come in a very combined manner that will determine our future and endanger the way how the human development evolves. So therefore the report, within that background of the uncertainties of the future, comes with a key question: what can be done to renew the and redefine the human development momentum in the region? It comes with the 3 key messages, which is the first one around unpackaging the people first, meaning that the economic or the growth needs to be seen and worked as closely related together with the human development. Oftentimes we see that the human aspect on human considerations to the human development come as a second thought. We argue, the report argues that it has to be considered mainstreamed and consider the human development into the growth strategies throughout, and that it has to start fast. That the people has to be at the center, people and meaning the generations of now and the future generations, we argue, and that has to start today, immediate. The second big point of the report is about the necessity of sustaining the growth. The necessity, the relevance or the criticality of growth, economic growth linked to the human development remains being critical. But the current, the world of the future, of course, comes with the disruptions and comes with the necessitates that the growth strategies that are rethought, are based on the new models. The need to recalibrate the way how the export-driven economies and the development strategies are combined with the internally focused development strategies is coming. There are a number of models and examples that the report is providing. And the third big point is about the change and how change happens, about the spirit of change and about the governance of change. The reform momentum and the politics of the reform has to be sustained. It's not enough to have the vision. For the vision or the policy to become true, a governance is extremely important. So the report argues about the need of forward-looking, foresight, anticipatory, agile, adaptive type of a governance that will implement the current policy, but also translate the ideas of new ideas into a policy. And it's a rather critical element of any development. And to respond to your questions, yes, we do hope that that report will be used in Mongolia. Very soon we will be launching it here and opening the debate. I hope it in the public and policymakers to make to adjust the messages to Mongolia.
Well, thank you very much for providing information about UNDP operation in Mongolia.
Thank you very much, Barla.
Well, that was the new episode of Sightline on MNB World. Today in our studio we had Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program in Mongolia, Mrs. Matilda Dimovska. We'll see you next time with more stories and updates.